am absolutely delighted to introduce Mike and William from AppleInsider. It's really kind of you to give up your time to speak to us this evening, gentlemen. And if I may, I will hand you the floor.
Well, actually, I'm going to grab the floor if I may. Sorry, other Mike. It's actually other Mike's idea that we do this at all, but I love it because you can tell I'm in Britain. I've long known Mac user groups, but I thought they had all kind of withered away. I'm in the West Midlands, and the Midlands Mac user group, I don't know when it died, but before I found it. So to see that you're all here and that you're doing all this, it's just brilliant. And I envy you the affinity classes already. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, he's just upset they don't let him cover software as much as he wants to. I mean, that's really what this boils down to.
Yeah, software guy, he's hardware. The other way to look at it is I'm right, he's wrong.
I mean, we could look at it that way, I suppose. But yeah. So I've got a list of questions here about what you folks would like to know about AppleInsider. But you don't know Willie or I from Adam. We're just gonna do a quick introduction. I'm Mike Worthley. I've been an AppleInsider for about 4 years, and I closed down MacNN before it. I started with MacNN in 2012, but that doesn't tell the full story because following a 8-year stint in U.S. Navy submarine program, I started reporting on technology for the Department of Defense for 12 years. So while my forward-facing stint on the internet's only been about 8 years, about 8.5 years, I've been on the beat for over 20 at this point. So, and William?
Goodness, so can I match that? Maybe in time I can, because one of my first jobs, I see myself as more a magazine guy than a computer guy originally. So although I worked on computer magazines, it was just the whole process I liked. But I was there, I remember an Apple guy coming to show us the new Newton in this gorgeous office we had in London and all that. And then, but I kind of segued out of it into BBC News, Radio Times, CFAX, if any of you are old enough to remember that. There's a nodding head there. I feel better now. Lots of BBC Radio. I write Doctor Who radio dramas sometimes, and I'm deputy chair of the Writers Guild. But the thing for me is that all the way along, it's been about using the technology. I love the fact that I have so many people on the drama side who have no idea I do this stuff with Mike, and lots of people who know me only from AppleInsider work who have no idea that I've written books for the British Film Institute and things. The reason I'm more software than hardware is I love this stuff for making things happen, getting things done, creating stuff. So that's where I come from this. And Mike just likes unscrewing PCIe cards or something. I don't know.
I do, but the biggest problem that I run into with coverage is that it's just not read. So yeah, I'm not allowed to give AppleInsider traffic numbers, but let's say the piece on the Apple Watch release 2 weeks ago got us X number of hits. If we're doing something on an Omni release, it'll get 1/5 of that, and that makes it not labor effective to do. So as much as I would love having 50 software articles a week, they just aren't worth the labor, and that's tragic. That I'm not happy about that, but there's also very little I can do about it, unfortunately.
Well, it's been nice talking to everybody.
Yes. Good night.
So I mean, that's unfortunately just the calculus of it. And we, in every publication, any publication you read on the internet right now, you're probably seeing extra ads and extra calls to action and extra sponsored posts and things of that nature. And the reason why MacNN closed is because Google kept on tightening down the towel that we relied on for moisture and keeping more of it for themselves and less for us. So while the coronavirus pandemic has helped our readership numbers, our year-over-year revenue is down a great amount because of that factor, and this is going to increasingly be a problem for independent media. You know, on that happy note,
yes,
I have a list of questions. Mike K, did you want to start with any of these in particular?
Muted.
Sorry, I passed a short list to William, so
I have
if you could work down that would be fantastic. I'm not sure if all our members actually know much about Apple Insider as a site. So
Sure.
perhaps a quick.
Apple Insider is one of the first Apple news-centric sites on the web. It is, unfortunately, also one of the last. 10 years ago, there were 40 or 50 sites like ours doing the same thing. And right now there are about 10. And believe it or not, that all of these sites aren't just a victim of Google, but they're a victim of Apple's own success. As Apple has become more of a powerhouse in industry, let's be honest, it's a giant company. It's much more than any of us would have possibly thought it was going to be 10 years ago. More and more regular venues have increased their Apple coverage. Like, for instance, I'm flaking on the name all of a sudden because I really don't personally like the guy. Mark Gurman, got it. Mark Gurman got hired away from 9 to 5 Mac about 6 years ago to go work at Bloomberg. So we're looking at an expansion of larger sites with larger pockets, like CBS, for instance, versus Apple Insider, who we don't take any money from Apple. We don't take any money from a larger corporate entity. We are who we are, and we're not beholden to anyone for our coverage. And frankly, that's why I like it. I think if Apple Insider got bought by an NBC or something, I think I'm out. That just doesn't work with how I want to do it. And frankly, our owner feels the same way about it. So, but yeah, we publish about 40 articles a day. We review all the stuff once we get a handle for it. We're starting to increase our third-party reviews. So if there's a gadget or something wacky you want reviewed, I mean, I've got a pile of them over there I've got to get to. We do that kind of thing. If it will connect your phone or connect your Mac, we're going to talk about it at some point. So, and regretfully, the software coverage is not where I would like it to be, but we already discussed that.
I do have another vent, a way out of this. I created a YouTube channel very specifically for writers who use Apple gear and stuff. So I do lots of OmniFocus coverage in there, and it gets a really nice reaction. It's like a pixel in comparison to what Apple Insider gets, but it keeps my heart safe. So
yeah, it's 58 keys. You should absolutely stop in at William's property on that. That is, he does the coverage when he will pitch something, and I say no. He will take it over there instead, and with my wholehearted approval, honestly. So I
actually thought I was pitching less to you because I completely understand. I mean, I know I complain because I love software so much, but it's inarguable what you say. But I thought I was bothering you less because I had this other outlet.
I mean, we'll air the dirty laundry later, but feel free to bother me with whatever. So it's yeah. But today is about sausage making, I guess. This is that's what we'll be talking about today. But first on the what the members want to know list is Apple Insider's opinion on Apple future product strategy, and not next year, but 3 to 5 years out, and what's next. William, I'm going to start with this one because I'm the hardware guy on this. I think what we're going to see is an introduction of Apple Silicon very, very soon, but they've already said that. But what I think, unfortunately, we're going to get on that is when Apple says the end of the year, they like to say the end of the year, but deliver like 6 of them on December 31st. And that way they can say, hey, we made this year, great. But we're going to see a 2-year cycle with the migration to Apple Silicon, and then we're just going to see that evolve like we've been seeing Intel Macs for the last couple of years. I think the Mac Pro will be last in that. I think we're not going to see a Apple Silicon Mac Pro, frankly, until the pros demand it, and until they decide that they don't need x86 compatibility anymore. I think that's when we see the first Apple Silicon Mac Pro. I think the iPhones will be mostly iterative over that time, but I also feel that looking at iPhones or Apple Watches is best looked at a 2-year lens instead of a 1-year lens. So it's like when you're watching a child grow up, if you're looking day to day, you don't see that. But when you look at pictures 2 years separate, you look at your child and say, oh my God, he's a foot taller. So that is very much how we're going to need to look at that for the next 3 or 5 years. I'm not expecting an Apple Watch like product in that time frame. I am expecting continued evolution of AirPods. There are physics that they're running up into about battery life, so any improvements would have to come from silicon improvements in AirPods. iPads, we're going to see the same thing we've been seeing. Again, looking at a 2-year cycle. In the iPad in 5 years, you're going to look at today's iPad Pro like you looked at the iPad 4 5 years ago. And that seems bizarre given the power that the iPad Pros have, but that's just how it is. And as time progresses, the iPad Pro features will continue to migrate down the line, like Apple Pencil support did on the entry level iPad. And I'm doing the air quotes because it's still better than just about any Android tablet you can buy at Apple's entry level price. But you're going to see that iPad Pro design migrate down, like it's moved to the iPad Air that will start shipping probably in the next week or two, and that kind of thing. And the last part that I left out of this is what happened to the Apple Car. And I don't think anything has happened to the Apple Car. I think Apple has decided along the way that their focuses just need to migrate a little bit. I'm not sure that they're ever looking at a whole car unit. I think they're very interested in the car technology. I don't think they have any interest in transmissions or brakes or anything boring in a car. What I think they have interested in is your dashboard and your entertainment system and perhaps your climate control and your windows and things like that. So I think any Apple Car will be produced in conjunction with another manufacturer. I don't think we're ever going to see, an Apple Car in a turntable in an Apple store or anything like that. I think it will be in partnership with some car manufacturer or another. I don't expect it's going to be Tesla, but it's hard to say at this point. I'm not looking at seeing much other than the continuing research on car technologies that we do cover at AppleInsider. I'm not expecting much in that until 2023 or 2024. William, you have anything to add to that? Or
I was just mentally running through the list of patents that I've read about the car, and there was one the other day about steering actuators. I had to look at what an actuator was, but you're right, I haven't seen anything of the dull stuff. There's been so many patents about everything from the shape of the chassis, the ventilation of it, that I disagree. I think there is going to be a car, but I'm reasonably sure you're right about it being in conjunction with somebody. I don't think they're just going to sell a CarPlay Plus to BMW or something. I think it's going to be a Apple designed vehicle.
I mean, that's the great thing about Apple is we'll all see together. If you had asked me in 2007 if Apple was working on a tablet, I would have said, well, yes, because there's the iPhone and they're obviously working on a tablet. But had you asked me that in 2004, I'm not sure I would have said yes, based on the technology that existed for tablets at the time. So I think that would have been something that I would have said, no, I doubt it. I think they're going to stick. I think they are going to make a phone. I think they are going to stick with the iPod, and we all know what happened with the iPod. So it's hard to, this year more than ever, it is hard to tell what Apple's future path looks like.
I was actually really quite startled a year last March. The big events they had announcing Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple News Plus and things. It suddenly seemed like actually that was the pivot point. We kept talking about Apple is transitioning to services. Well, suddenly it was so many services. I'm trying to think of any service that they're not covering. Yeah, I mean, you might not think they're doing it well, or you might love it, but addressing an area, I can't see a gap. It's bothering me. But I feel like they have become this gigantic services company. And will they keep doing that and retain everything we've always liked about them with the hardware and the software? Yeah, probably. But I think we are definitely in a new era of it. And I can't see what's coming next. And I want to. Mike, am I missing something obvious?
No, I don't think so. Here's the thing with Apple, though, right? If you look at the Apple Watch, just the Apple Watch, before it was a Series anything, the original Apple Watch, is they said, hey, this is a fashion device. And that didn't really stick. And they took a year and said, okay, hey, it's a fitness tracker. And that stuck. The difference between Apple with services and other companies like, say, Spotify, is Apple has the cash hoard to wait. If their first take at a service doesn't stick, they've got the money to say, oh, okay, well, let me go shake out the sofa and get another couple million out, and we can keep running it for another 2 years or 3 years or 10 years or however long it takes until they're happy with the result. And I think that people saying, oh, Apple TV Plus is such a failure, there's not that much content, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to watch. But this is just 1 year of released content. What is that catalog going to look like in 2025? So that's how this will continue. I think we're going to find Apple itself from a corporate entity being less and less beholden to traditional media venues like Paramount or Disney even, or any of the larger content creators. They're not going to have to say, okay, well, we want all of your stuff and we'll pay you $80 million for it for a month, or whatever the deal is. I have no idea what the terms of the deal is, and no one's ever talked about it. And Apple Arcade, it's going to be the same way. They're just going to keep adding content and keep getting developers and keep on piling stuff into it until it's just this massive content pile that they'll still charge $4.99 or $5.99 or whatever it is for it, or with Apple One, or with the Apple One bundle, $30 for everything, for instance. So that services pivot is done. They have made the pivot. They're on the services, and it's going to be about increasing what's on the services from here on out. I'd be happy to take questions or anything on this if you'd like, or I could just go down this list and we can do questions after, however you want to handle it, Mike.
I'm just unmuting myself. Something I did forget to say to everybody is that these guys welcome questions. So please, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Thank you.
I have a couple, Mike W.
Yeah. Go ahead, James. What's up?
First of all, your comments about the Apple Plus app, I think are right on. To me, I view it, I'm old enough to remember the first days of HBO when they didn't even have a full day of programming. And,
right.
And you know, for 18 hours a day, you saw videos of a bicycle going through a park. So I agree that, first of all, that I think Apple Plus, their first entries have been excellent. I've watched The Morning Show. I've watched Defending Jacob. I've watched the Tom Hanks movies. These are competitive with the best of TV. So I agree with you. My second comment / question is, what about my beloved Apple TV streamer? Anything in the pike about that?
I think if for no other reason, it's going to be not cost effective for Apple to make A10 chips anymore. So I think if for no other reason, then Apple's got a pile of A12Zs or Zs, or I mean, you'll have to forgive my Americanism on that. The A12Z processor, I think that inevitably the Apple TV will get a new processor just because of economy of scale.
Do you think it'll enable browsing?
I don't see them ever going to an internet browser on the Apple TV. They are very explicit about not allowing browser apps on the App Store for the Apple TV. And I don't think that's because they're waiting to drop Safari on it. I think that there are too many people at Apple who looked at web TV and just said, wow, this is terrible. And I think they're going to rely on you using your iPad or your Mac or your iPhone for continued browsing in that regard, at least in the immediate future.
And what about the crappy remote?
I think we're stuck with that one. It's very clear that Apple is sticking with that Siri remote, but honestly, my suggestion to you on that is use your iPhone. The remote app on the iPhone.
I do, especially for the 10-second rewind and the 10-second fast forward.
Yeah, I'm with you on that remote. That remote is nasty. It's just it's better now that they've got the little button on it, the little white around the menu button there.
Right.
But it's it's still it always finds cushions in my sofa without fail. It'll slip right down in there and it's gone for days.
Yeah, mine too.
But,
I want to put one of those little chains with a big block of wood on it.
What I actually did on that is, for easier telling of up and down in the dark, is I've got a Velcro strip on the back. It's hard to tell here. I'll move a little closer to the camera. I've got a little tactile Velcro strip on there, and I can either use it to hang it on something, or more commonly, just to orient my hand in the dark.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, I'm with you on that.
I'd like to make a comment about the HBO comparison. So many American channels were started, Fox and UPN and all that. They did so many evenings and things. But I think, even though I think we look at HBO as this gigantic success that it became, it wasn't until the Larry Sanders Show happened that it suddenly burst into life. It was making great shows, and that one hit. And I think Apple TV Plus hasn't had that moment yet. Netflix had it with House of Cards. Disney got it with The Mandalorian straight away, and they must be so grateful for that. At some point, Apple will hit something really big that will just burst out. But I'm honestly surprised how many people I work with at the right skilled places who will not look at Apple TV Plus because they hate Apple. What can you do? But
Well,
something will break.
That's just silly.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but they're otherwise fine people, you know, so.
But Luddites.
Anybody else before we move on to the next?
Yeah, Mike, can you just in case any of our members aren't aware of the fact that you can actually use your iPhone, because we certainly do in this house for the same reasons as you, to operate Apple TV. Can you just demonstrate? Are you able just to wave it at folks?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second here. I don't know what Apple TVs are on. I'm likely going to startle somebody in the house using those.
Actually, I'd like to disagree with this because I use my iPhone Apple TV control for searching when I need to type, when Siri will not understand what I'm looking for. But otherwise, I want to change the channel. I put the phone down, it's gone off again. I've got to pick it up, swipe control. I actually don't dislike the Apple TV remote as much.
This is not a default installed app, but the app is just called Remote. And if you just search Remote, it'll be either the first, second hit, depending on who's paying for that first hit today. And you synchronize. It's not really a synchronization process. It will use you use your iCloud to hunt down your Apple TV devices that are on your local network. And the first time you run it, it'll ask for a connection device, and it'll bring up this screen. And I'm looking at it, and it's Den. And I already know one of my children is watching her Disney movies on it right now, so I'm not going to disturb her on that. But the area, the large black space above that is all touchscreen. And if something pops up on your Apple TV where it needs a text input, it'll pull up the keyboard from the bottom, and you just type on your keyboard wherever you're going with that. So it's a larger touch surface. You've got your camera lenses for easy orientation of up and down. It's just, to me, it's just superior interface. But honestly, I don't rely on, and I've got HomePods in here, so I'm not going to say your name out loud. I don't rely on Apple's voice assistant that often, just because I haven't been that happy with the results.
I do use Siri. I mean, actually, I thought I was using the remote control a different way for me because I'm just using it as a control center thing. But I've just checked, and I obviously have installed the app at some point. That's how I'm able to get it in the control center. But Siri is my friend most of the time, except I have one HomePod in my office, and wherever I am, in the house, in the local town, in the city, this HomePod hears the magic words and responds. It's like, it ignores everything else and goes to it.
We've got some questions coming in on chat, so if I could throw one or two of these at
Sure.
Martin Richmond Hardy asks, Martin, are you able to unmute yourself and ask yourself? He's gone very quiet. Okay, how do you see AI being incorporated in services?
I think that there's a lot of artificial intelligence behind the scenes right now. I think that just because you're not seeing it, and just because you're not seeing Siri pop, I've said it, and now my HomePods are going to turn on, and just because you're not seeing some kind of dialogue pop up in your phone is doing a lot of machine learning to begin with. Like, for instance, if you look at your photos, it'll pop up hey, these are your memories from this date. But if you look at it, it's not all of the pictures. It's 5 or 6 of them. And on device, the Photos app is looking for the pictures that it thinks are composed the best. Like, for instance, this time last year, I was at a trampoline park with my son. And the pictures that it showed me this morning were not blurry, not action shots. There weren't a ton of other kids in the frame. It selected the pictures of my son, and those are the ones I wanted to see, not the 50 where, it's a blurred arm as he's jumping on the trampoline or anything like that. And all of your recommendations are already powered by machine learning now. And this is just something we're going to see more and more and more. And I think you're first going to see it in maps. I think that Apple's Maps is going to get better about where it thinks you want to go in advance, as opposed to, hey, you're done with the errand, you want to go home yet? As opposed to what you get now. And I think we're going to start seeing this march more in iOS 14 than we did in iOS 13. I think it's going to take a little bit longer to get to Mac OS in that regard. But just as you see the recommendation engines grow, I think that's going to be the biggest indication that Apple is just keep on going into the artificial intelligence. And frankly, the hiring of John Giandrea in end of 2018, I want to say, is probably the biggest sign on the road that Apple's really going to push heavy into machine learning and artificial intelligence.
I'm so glad you said his name because I've been trying to work out how to pronounce it. Didn't he say in an interview recently that he came along to Apple, drawn to it from Google for all the obvious reasons, he said, and then explained some of them, but he was surprised at the dearth. There wasn't a handwriting AI team or something, and now there is. And he said, and machine learning is in everything for it. And it's kind of insidious, but powerful. So,
where Apple is going to be a little bit behind Google on this is instead of sending most of your queries to a server farm, Apple wants to do them here. They want to do as much as they can on your device as opposed to on a Google server somewhere. So you've got less oomph here than you've got in man, my brain is just not functioning today, where Google's headquarters is. I'll just leave it at that. I'll just pretend that I never even was going to say the city.
Well, thanks for that. What I was thinking of was sort of like when you mentioned sort of 5 years out, which is a long time in technology. We've got a gazillion apps on the App Store, and you've got somebody who thinks, well, I've got this particular problem. I want to do this. What should I use to solve it?
And that's part of what I'm expecting with the recommendation engines. I think that you're going to see things like that pop up in the App Store. I think you're going to see expansion of the digital assistant on here to say, hey, I can't sort my spreadsheet. And it's going to say, okay, well, these 10 spreadsheets programs will let you do this better than the one you're using. Or it will say something to the effect of just, here's a whole bunch of knowledge about it, and we like this one the most, as opposed to just relying on who's visiting the most, trafficking the most. Because I'm going to say this here in front of everybody, and if you're part of this industry, I apologize. The people who focus on SEO as a business, I hate you all. Because it doesn't serve the users. Just because this one article has got 150,000 viewers on it doesn't mean that the information in it is 15 times better than the one that has 10,000 on it. It just means that more people have clicked on it. And I'm hoping that the advancement of machine language will help us weed through some of that crap. Because it's honestly a real problem right now. Because if you do a Google search on something, it's not the first hit you're relying on. It's going to be like the 10th or 11th one that finally gets to what you actually need it to do. And that's where I'm hoping the big improvements will come.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Did I answer your question? I mean, if there's
Yes,
more to
thank
it,
you
I'm
very
happy
much.
to keep going. Okay.
That's great.
I didn't realize that, Mike, you and I think the same thing about SEO. So I've just recently been getting really weary of the top stories coming up on a search always being ones where the first 5 paragraphs are basically trying to get me to read the article I'm already reading.
Yeah.
And the actual thing I've got to stage where I click on the headline and I just move to halfway down the article because that's where it's going to say Elvis is alive or not. Or whatever.
Well, I mean, and that's why in the interest of full disclosure, my owner has hired an SEO team, and the meetings are every other Friday, and they're the worst hour of my life, honestly, on any given week. But I have drawn a line in the sand where, look, if we're not telling our readers what they need, and proof that this is where you need it in the first 3 paragraphs, we're doing our job wrong. So anyway, like I said, sausage making day. So actually, this is semi-related. How do we go about getting our stories, and what sort of insider knowledge or clues that we have regarding Apple OSs and our relationship with Apple? Well, I am very happy to report we have 0 relationship with Apple. In fact, our relationship is so non-existent, we don't always get invites to events, and the only guy that does is Dan Dilger. And that's just because he has an extraordinary long history with Apple, and they like him very much. They like me less, because I get things like keyboard failure rates in the 2016 MacBook Pro, and I say things like that in public, and they're not huge fans of that. But that's my job, and that's kind of the way I see it. If it means we don't get to go to an event, then so be it. We can do the job, especially now when they're doing remote events, just as well as anybody else can. As far as
to complete the picture, I should say they love Dan. They like you less. They've never heard of me. That's the
that's
range.
not true. Based on the few conversations I've had with them, they do know who you are, but by name, and that's about it. So, what we do get from Apple is when they want something promulgated, like the COVID Google frameworks for the coronavirus exposure notification apps. They will tell us about half an hour before it comes and drop about 40,000 words on us and say the embargo is up in a half an hour. Go. So I mean, that's about the extent of our relationship with Apple in that regard. How do we go about getting our stories? The internet is a wild and woolly place. This is probably best talked about in regards to a schedule. So William checks in at 5 o'clock Eastern time. And I will check in, depending what my kids need, because I'm getting them off to school and things like that. I will check in with him between 5 and 6 and, ask what's on fire. And the answer is usually nothing. But in that time, William, you've gone through what, about 300 emails that you got overnight, thereabouts? You've already gone through your emails? Yes. Yeah. And we have a communal email box at AppleInsider where we'll get, overnight, I will have received 18,000 emails. And we've trained it so well that there's a lot of stuff I don't need to look at. But what we do have is we have people from the Chinese supply chain sending us pictures and things of that nature. You'll see that AppleInsider will do things like notable leaker from Twitter, so-and-so says that the iPhone 12 is going to be in this size. That's all fine and good, but we don't just go on that. If we've got something else to back it up, then we'll go with it. Like, for instance, we'll have a picture from the Chinese supply chain, or we'll have Ming-Chi Kuo, who's got more contacts inside supply chain than we do. He'll send us his research notes, and we'll talk about those. It's a combination of different factors, but it's also not a job that I'd want, like Amber Neely, for instance. She's been doing this job off and on for about 6 years, but I wouldn't want her to be responsible for that aspect of the job. If we published everything we had, the AppleInsider news page would be 90% garbage. It'd be, this person from Spain says that there's a new iPod coming. Who is this person from Spain? We don't know. Would we get a lot of traffic from doing it? Yeah. Is traffic my end goal? No, it really isn't. So in many ways, the job relies on taking information from multiple directions on the internet and saying, okay, what's the coherent whole here? What is the actual story behind these angles and these directions? And what does this really, and so this supplier says that they just got an order for 100,000 micro LEDs from Apple. What does that mean? What technology is that going into? Oh, well, this analyst over here said 3 weeks ago that there's a new chassis for the iPad. So maybe that's what this is for, because the timing is right, because both those things have to line up at about the same time. I wish I could say, and I said this on Twitter the other day, and not everyone may get the reference on this. I wish I could say that I was Lou Grant doling out stories. I wish I could say that I had the focus and control that Lou Grant does. But I'm really like that editor in Bloom County who's just pounding his desk on the forehead and just can't take another minute of it. Just information overload. It's just so much to go through it all the time. And, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm, breaking my arm, patting myself on the back here. But it's very much being the colander for the readers, is shaking the water out and just giving you the good stuff in the colander. And that's my primary goal.
As soon as you say the Lou Grant reference, you may not even know this, Mike, that I am a writer, I'm a journalist, I'm a drama writer at all because of Lou Grant.
Oh, I know.
1977 to 1981, MTM series, Ed Asner, wonderful writing. Today, I had an email from one of the writers on Lou Grant, and the little boy in me, because Seth Freeman wrote to me. It was so exciting. It was just great. He sent me his play. I'm really excited. But I think what you've explained is kind of the nuts and bolts process of it. But I think there's also a more nebulous side. And one of the things I like about AppleInsider is that we have this team that's all over the world, really, but also in so many other areas. Like Amber is so hot on art and Adobe products and things. She tends to know about things. I have lots of friends who are working with Apple TV Plus, trying to get programs made, being delayed in production, all sorts of things. A huge number of times I cannot say what my friends have told me, but I'm aware that it's there and I can look out for the thing, and I can see. Very early on, there was all the producers I knew were telling me that Apple really was hype. Is this being recorded? It's not being recorded.
It is.
It is.
A company that rhymes with Apple may have been a bit more hands-on than Apple was saying. That has actually improved. there apparently. Still long delays, but nothing compared to BBC One. So I think, yeah, knowing the industry and different parts of it and being able to get together is one of the strengths that I think builds around the kind of the diary items of news, the breaking stuff. We're conscious of the context. So that's what I like about working on AppleInsider.
My philosophy at Mackinac and here has always been I would rather be right than first. And that doesn't serve us with traffic necessarily all the time, but it does. At the bare minimum, it makes me feel better about the job, because if I was coming in and just trying to glean maximum clicks out of everything, I'd rather be sweeping the street than doing that.
I don't want to diss another publication because, of course, there's so many great things there, but I've slowly backed away from reading Forbes magazine. Now that I've got Apple News Plus and it keeps putting it up to me, it's just everything is a shock. Everything is a gasp. Apple is doomed. Apple is a saint. And it's always, I don't know, it's something like a possible color has been named for the iPhone 12. And it's like,
well, it's actually funny you should mention that, because Forbes has this thing called the Contributor Network, where most of Apple's content comes from, and there's very little editorial oversight. They very much they're literally paid by the traffic that the content generates, where we are not. The AppleInsider staff is strict hourly. So that kind of pay structure, I understand where it has to come from given the realities of Google. I get it, but I don't feel that lends to responsible reporting at all. I feel that leads toward your headlines. I feel that leads to YouTuber face and things of that nature, which I'm not a big fan of. So I don't know whose question that was, but does it answer your question, your satisfaction?
It was Simon's, and I don't know if he's here. Simon, are you with us?
I see a Simon Wallace down there.
No.
Is that different Simon? Okay.
Different Simon. It sounds like he isn't, unfortunately. So when you talk about your staff being worldwide and stuff, how big is it?
Let's see, we have Malcolm Owen, he's in Wales. We have William, I'm here in DC. We have Amber Neely, she's in Erie, Pennsylvania. We have Mike Peterson, he's in California. We have Wes, he's in Tennessee. We have Mikey Campbell, who's our night editor, he's in Hawaii. Our editor-in-chief is in New York City. Our developer is I think he's in Texas, but he might be moving right now. Our app developer is in Washington State. Christine is in, I want to say Idaho, but I might be wrong on that. So, I mean, and there's a bunch of other people like Victor Marks and Steven Silver. And I mean, we probably have 7 or 8 other writers. I've used a gentleman called Brian Patterson, who's a webcomic artist. He's reviewed tablets, and he has another tablet review for us coming. So, I mean, we have, all told, if you counted everybody that's contributed to AppleInsider over this year, we probably have 30 people. Wow. But that doesn't mean that they're all full-time. There's only 7 of us or so that are full-time. I mean, people have this vision when they email us that we're sitting in a dark warehouse in brown robes, and there's a 60-watt bulb hanging from the ceiling, and you can't see the ceiling, and it's swinging, and we're making these editorial decisions about things. But really, I mean, no 60-watt bulb.
There's another question or two on the chat. Do you think Apple Music will stream high-definition audio?
That is a two-pronged question. I think that it will stream high-quality audio when the digital converter on the phones is a bit better. The HomePods can do it now. The HomePods can do the kind of decoding for the full lossy that I assume that you're talking about in that regard. But I think it has to come to more mobile devices first. And I mean, that sounds dumb at first because you're looking at the Lightning port and maybe eventually USB-C on the phone. But I don't see that this is something that Apple rolls out beyond ALAC, between Apple's lossy codec, anytime soon. Maybe 2 or 3 years as the phone progresses, but no sooner than that. There's just, if you look at this Mac user group, we're all smart and intelligent and handsome and beautiful and so forth. But there is a much larger audience outside of this user group that is Apple's main audience now. And this is something I'm trying to remind the Apple Insider forum goers that, oh, you know, I want this specific Mac and I want these specific features and these are this and these are this and these are this. But that forum group has gone from the primary audience 20 years ago to an insignificant portion of it now. And that is, and then that's kind of all related. So it's when more people can take advantage of it reliably and realistically, then Apple will do it. But right now, the phone infrastructure really doesn't allow for it. And frankly, Apple isn't quite that interested in it, given the proclivities for the AirPods. They're great. They do what they need to do, but they're not exactly what you'd call studio quality audio. So yes, but someday, but not today.
Is 5G going to help when people get used to more and faster data being delivered?
The 5G situation in the UK is better than it is in the United States. Outside my window, I have 5G, technically. But my 5G here is slower than my 4G. So while there are routing improvements in the 5G technology, the blistering speeds that the carriers are talking about rely on part of the spectrum called millimeter wave. And basically you would, and I'm pointing my telephone pole, but I would have to see a transmitter on that telephone pole for me to get that speed from 5G in this house. And even then my window would have to be open because the slightest amount of glass will block that. So as much as I would like to say, oh yeah, 5G is going to be great, the truth of the matter is we're 3 years realistically away in the United States from 5G really being a significant market penetrator. And the carriers are just straight lying to us about it. And, they say, hey, it's fast, it's great. It is, if you're standing right here and you're holding your phone at this angle and you're on one foot and you don't have a hat on. I mean, I'm exaggerating the hat a little bit, but the conditions that you need for best 5G speed are extraordinarily limited. So.
Something to look forward to, Madam.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I agree. In a couple of years, this is going to be great. In a couple of years, this is going to be central to autonomous cars on the United States highways. Because there are routing improvements, there are packet movement improvements, there are all kinds of improvements, but they're just not here yet, and they're not going to be for some time. And the United States being Apple's primary market, that's kind of where they focus first. And I'm not necessarily sure that's fair, but just kind of how they do things. So.
But you think it's better in the UK?
Yeah, I mean,
the UK's 5G.
Yeah, the infrastructure, looking at the build, it's much more advanced, much farther along, and has a superior backbone than the United States version does right now, today.
Nuts! I'm going to have to buy an iPhone 12. I'm trying to resist.
You said there were more questions in chat. I guess I could look at them myself if I was so inclined. Hang on a second here.
Yeah, I think we're there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think we're set on the questions there. Let's so the next one is there stories we theoretically wouldn't publish? And I kind of laid a segue for this earlier. We spoke about the tens of thousands of emails I've got to sort through in the morning. A significant portion of those are manifestos from people who have been wronged by Apple. While I will look at people saying, hey, I've got a problem in my MacBook Pro when I installed this system software, is this something you can help me out with? Yeah, I'll absolutely look at that. But if I'm getting a manifesto about how Apple's behind this guy's dead dog and this is a problem and this is a problem and Tim Cook is the devil and it would be this way if Steve Jobs was still alive, no chance am I publishing any of that. Zero. If the implication of the question is if there's something negative about Apple, would I publish it? Yeah, I do it all the time. I mean, that's one of the benefits of not taking money from Apple. I don't have any second thoughts about any of that. So like I said before, I have a network of service providers I talk to, and they provide me data on what's failing and what's not, and what percentage and what's not. And one of the things that proved to the Apple Insider folks that I was able to do this job is I got the data together on keyboard failure rates, and we kept on pushing it for a couple of years okay, the 2007 is a little bit better, but this is still terrible. The 2018 is a little bit better. Okay, we're right at about where the 2012 to 2015 model was, to where we are now with the 2019 MacBook Pro, and then the 16-inch MacBook Pro that's got the new keyboard, which is the failure rates, the first year failure rates on that is virtually identical to the 2012 through 2015 MacBook Pro model. So it's, while this, because of the mercies of Google, I do very much feel that part of my responsibility to our readers is keeping Apple on his toes about things. And it doesn't serve, you know, it doesn't serve anybody to publish the manifestos, because there's no way I'm getting through all the data in that, even if it is data, not anecdotal. So yeah, I guess the moral of the story is don't send me manifestos, I guess. I mean, I don't know whose question that was. Did I answer that completely?
I actually don't know. So
okay.
I'm going to say yes. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, please, go ahead.
Actually, for some reason recently, I've had a lot of PR people sending me details. I think it was about a toothbrush that had Bluetooth on it.
Yeah.
But it only worked with Android or something. And the first time you patiently explain, not for our market, but it's like once you've replied, they've got you on their list. And I just get hammered by this stuff, which we would never cover. And I'm not interested in myself either.
The toothbrush that William is referring to is the graphic they sent us is Apple is doing the same thing and we're innovating. And they showed us in the graphic was a picture of the AirPods charging case and how it flips open, and their toothbrush carrying case and how it flips open too.
Now you see, you're talking me into it suddenly.
Yeah,
I'm thinking.
I mean, I'm not certain why they would think that that was something that would be of interest to us, because like William said, it doesn't even connect to an iPhone. But yeah, I mean, there's no particular value in that, and you'll have to excuse the beeping. There appears to be a driver dropping off a dumpster across the street. So a skip, I guess. The
Skip,
UK,
yes.
Yeah, it's dropping off what appears to be a 30-foot skip. So it might be noisy here for the next few minutes. Let's see. What do we expect is coming up for Apple software and hardware in the next 12 months? Well, we are on the cusp of the iPhone. We expect the iPhone 12 event on about October 13th, thereabouts. This isn't inside information or anything like that, but this is gleaned from leakers and supply chain and information that we look at for international shipping reservations, believe it or not. Apple Silicon is this year, but like I said earlier in the show, I expect there will be 6 of them shipped on December 31st, so they can say that they made their deadline. Let's see.
I misunderstood you. I thought you meant 6 models. You mean?
Oh no, I mean six units.
Machines.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a trend that they actually started with the cylindrical Mac Pro. Is they literally shipped 100 of them to customers on December 31st of 2013 or 12. I forget the year. It's been a while, to say that they made the year. And the iPad, not the iPad, the iMac Pro shipped in mid-December and in one configuration and in extremely limited quantities, and just on and on and on. So I expect that it will be the same model in that regard. Next year, I am expecting I'm expecting an Apple Watch exterior case redesign. There's too much smoke there for there not to be fire underneath it. We were halfway expecting it this year, but we didn't get it. So I suspect it'll be next year. And again, like I said earlier, I'm not expecting anything blow the doors off the place. I'm not expecting one more thing. I'm expecting iteration this year. I'm expecting in the next year, I'm expecting a new MacBook. This would be the Apple Silicon MacBook. I'm expecting a Mac Mini and probably an iMac. But beyond that, we'll see. I don't think the next 365 days is MacBook Pro, is Apple Silicon MacBook Pro. I think that will stick with Intel for another year. William, software, what are you expecting from software from Apple for this year?
Oh, that's so hard. I'm not seeing anything big. I really want the translation thing in Safari in Big Sur to come out across the world. Why is it not going to be available in the UK for it? I can understand it's a limited number of languages, but we speak apart from the whole skip dumpster thing, we speak nearly the same language.
I agree.
Let us have it.
I
think, although it's not, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't think it's, so doing it again. This is on my mind. It's not really software, but it is services. I think Apple Card is well overdue for spreading out for it. I really thought at the end of the first year there might be something about it. And there's this talk that Australian banks are deeply involved with things. It's encouraging. I think that's what we're going to see next. But in terms of new software, Final Cut Pro 11, I don't think it is going to happen yet. But I don't know. Mike, am I missing anything obvious?
I don't think so. I expect that the iWork suite will continue to just march on with, hey, this new feature is now supported. I'm not expecting anything huge out of there. Again, right now we're just dealing with iOS 14 and Big Sur is coming. And if you're inclined to put the beta on your hardware, please don't. Just wait another 2 weeks for them to finish some of this stuff off. It's just, I want it to be better than it is right now. But yeah, that's, I'm afraid I don't have a better answer for you on that. This is a tough time. While Apple was easier able to absorb the costs and the reality of working in disparate locations, it doesn't mean it's been easy for them in any regard. When the coronavirus lockdown started for AppleInsider, we just kind of said, okay, and we just kept going, because we're scattered all over the globe, literally. But Apple didn't have that luxury. They have this relatively new campus that isn't even half full, and now all of a sudden they've got to send people to their homes to go deal with this stuff. So there's a lot of data security and a lot of product security issues that they had to work through, and frankly are still working through. So yeah, software, I think, is we're not going to see a huge amount of advancements this year, I'm afraid.
I do think we're going to see more Catalyst stuff going on. And when Apple Silicon can run iOS apps, I think that's when we'll see shortcuts come to the Mac. And I love shortcuts, but I worry what will happen to AppleScript as well if it's not needed as much. For
Catalyst, the stuff from Apple will be Catalyst from day one. There's no question. Big Sur ships that there's going to be almost nothing running on Intel frameworks. I mean, looking at TextEdit, I'm on Big Sur on this machine right now, and like I said, I regret it. But TextEdit is Catalyst. Just about looking at the Apple provided apps, everything is Catalyst. So where Catalyst is really going to start singing is when the developers really start to lean into it. And this has happened before for a lot of us here in this chat. This happened with the Intel migration, and it happened with PowerPC to it happened with x86 68,000 of PowerPC back in the day. So
can you just define Catalyst?
Sure. Catalyst is the technology that Apple's using to bridge the Intel to Apple Silicon gap. So what we've seen so far from Catalyst is really impressive. If the internal name for it, for some of the people who have been using Apple products for a while, they called it Rosetta 2 for the longest time internally. Where Catalyst apps, there's a couple different aspects to it. There's either the programming the one code base to run on both, which we used to call fat binaries. And the other aspect of it is, okay, you've got an Intel app, that's fine. We're going to use the new Rosetta technology, and we're going to do just-in-time compilation for your application. We're going to do a bunch of stuff the first time you run it, and then everything else we're going to translate on the fly as we go. So, in theory, and stick with that one with me for a minute. In theory, what you're running right now on your Intel Mac will run just fine on your first Apple Silicon Mac. Now, how well that works actually for the just-in-time translation, I don't know. We'll all see. We'll all find out together, because we don't have reliable access to an Apple Silicon Mac. So
I like to say, I talked to one developer that's been around since the days of Next, and they said technically they were really interested, quite fascinated by Catalyst, but they have an extremely well-established Mac app and an equally extremely established iOS app. So for them, they've talked about maybe doing some of their internal software on Catalyst, but they're not that fussed. And yet you talk to a newer developer and they're thinking, I've got this great iOS thing, now I can have Mac as well. So I think there'll be a transition to who makes what. But
how well your apps are going to work is going to depend very much on how close to the iron it gets. If the developer has strayed far from the Apple developers guidelines and best practices, then it's going to break. But if it hews very closely to what Apple's been recommending for the last 2 years, then you're probably going to be okay. If you're an avid game player in the Mac, You already dealt with a lot of your games going away with the shift from 32-bit to 64, and you're going to deal with more going to Apple Silicon.
Are you all gamers, by the way? I'm not, I'm afraid, but no, some head shake.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the impact of Apple Silicon is going to depend very much on your software. Like, for instance, I've got a Mac Mini down here which hosts most of my services to this house. You know, the kids' Disney movies will be locally served in case of an internet outage and other things like that. And I'm just going to be able to drop in an Apple Silicon Mac in there, and I'm never going to know the difference. But if you've got your Intel Mac, say you've got a 2012 MacBook Pro and you've been installing stuff on it since 2012, and maybe some of the stuff has updates, maybe some of the stuff doesn't. The newer stuff that has updates will probably be okay. The older stuff probably won't. So, question, do you think the new Apple Silicon Macs will run Windows, perhaps using a virtual machine such as Parallels? Parallels is being really shaky about this. They really haven't committed to anything in this regard. I think that it is very much a learning experience for them, but my recommendation on this is if you are reliant on any kind of x86 code, to stick with an Intel Mac for as long as you can. The virtual machine situation is very much up in the air. Apple has said that they are working with places like Docker and other virtualization solutions similar to that to get stuff running. But given that it's not going to be running on native hardware anymore, there's going to be some kind of speed hit on it. And with resultant compatibility issues, since it's running in an emulation layer instead of in native code and other things such as that. So where a lot of publications will say, hey, Big Sur is out, go do it, or Apple Silicon is out, go buy an Apple Silicon Mac. You really got to look at your workflow to decide where your pain points are going to be. And if any of them are reliant on, like I said, if any of them they have to run an x86 or they have to run on Windows, just kind of pump the brakes a little bit before you jump on that.
I can throw in that I was in a Parallels press briefing and they were asked about this. They were asked about it several times, and every time their response was, anyway.
Yep, driving around the problem. Yeah.
What to say?
There are just too many unanswered questions, and there's going to be too many unanswered questions until actual production hardware hits people's hands. The SDK, the transition kit that they have is in a Mac Mini box, but it doesn't have Thunderbolt. Apple's promised that Thunderbolt support will be included. We still don't know anything about, for instance, external GPUs, which I rely on a great deal on Apple Silicon. We don't have any idea about that, and Apple isn't saying anything about it. There's just so many questions still that we're not going to have until anything ships. How about Parallels running older Mac OS versions that were Intel based? If you are running on an Intel Mac, you're fine. Even on Big Sur, it's not a problem. Parallels relies on an x86 processor in your Mac. It relies on an Intel processor. The only issue with Parallels running on the on Apple Silicon, we just don't know how well it's going to work. So if you've got a workflow that works, stick with it until you're sure that your workflow on Apple Silicon does too. That's my recommendation. I don't see Big Sur breaking anything in that regard, but Big Sur running on Apple Silicon, that's the problem. Ferrers, does that answer your question? I'll keep an eye on the chat box. We'll come back to it if it doesn't. Let's see. Why are Apple hardware products so expensive? Apple products, if you look at numbers, if you look at X gigabytes of RAM and Y gigabytes of storage and this resolution screen and this kind of thing, there is a price premium. There's no mistaking about it. You know, we're all here, we're all adults. We know this, that people call this an Apple tax. The problem is if you look at businesses who have adopted Macs, you will look at the fact that their Macs will run 3.5 years instead of 2 years. And their cost of support is half. And IBM is famous for this. IBM. And said that their cost of supporting individual users on Mac OS was half that it was on Windows. So up front, you are paying more. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's overpriced for what you get. I'm so hesitant to just compare numbers and gigahertz and anything else like that. This is, you know, even in the reviews we do and even knowing full well who the main cadre of AppleInsider readers are, there's not a lot of benefit in in a lot of these comparisons, the gigahertz and gigabytes to across the board. It's, and the biggest metaphor for it is obviously comparing apples to oranges. I like my PCs. I've got a PC down here. I've got a Xeon PC down here, but they do different things. They do it differently. And I'm not expecting the Xeon to last 11 years like the Mac Pro out in the other room did, or does. It's still running. It's just not presently running. But so Apple knows that it can charge that, and so they do. And if people decide they're going to stop paying that kind of money, then they do that. But I think that the iPhone SE, the new iPhone SE, and the previous one was released for a reason. I think that Apple prices things how they want to price things based on what they feel they can get for it. So I think the iPhone SE realizes that there is a market for lower cost. I'm just not ever sure that the Mac market, which is 1/20th the user volume that the iPhone is ever going to see the same, other than the Mac Mini. Do I have any info on the rumored 23-inch iMac? Will it be Intel based? I do not. I do think that the 23-inch iMac is real. I do not think it is Intel. I am reasonably positive that that is an Apple Silicon Mac. We didn't cover it because there wasn't enough to back it. But there are images floating around of Foxconn employees having a first day of production for the iMac image, where they're having a little get together in the parking lot, and they had food and the whole 9 yards. And I didn't have reliable enough information say this picture was taken yesterday, like the person who took it claimed they did. Could have very easily been taken 4 months ago. There is a reasonable chance that that picture was for an Apple Silicon Mac, and if they're iMac, and if they're going to release an Apple Silicon Mac, say in February, production has to start now, at least on some components of it, just because of the realities of sourcing components and international shipping. So, did I answer the question on why are Apple hardware products so expensive? I don't know whose that was.
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything I can amplify that for you? Is there any other related questions you have to that?
I'd kind of just add to what you just said, and there's been a massive, so many people have contributed to a conversation going on Mac to the Future at the moment about that very subject.
I saw that.
Absolutely every living person says the same thing. Buy a PC, it'll break in 2 years. Buy a Mac, you can build furniture with it.
I was on the team, I mean, this is going into the Wayback Machine for this one. I was on the team that promoted the G3 server to the US Army. And they picked the G3 server because the mean time between failures was more than twice Intel equivalent hardware. And that was their primary consideration. The cost, per year of operation, it was less than the Intel-based solutions, and support was a lot less as well. Those machines ran for the U.S. Army until 2010, and I did this in 1999. So the couple of $1 million that they spent on enormous racks full of G3 server hardware ran for 11 years, and mostly without just, oh, hey, with the security patch, let's put it on, fine, done. And that's really all they had to do. I mean, yes, they had a couple hot swaps, or hey, this unit's broken, take it out, put in the new one, but that's it. It is, to this day, it is still one of their cheaper rollouts that they ever had. And it's also the same reason the Virginia Tech G5 cluster that they did just 6 years later they decided on G5 for very much the same reason. Is they had other options, but at the time this was their best choice. So do I think the iPhone 12 will release this November? From our sources, I think that we are going to see some iPhone 12 ship in October. In fact, I think that we will see pre-orders start on the 16th, with them shipping the following week on the 23rd. I think that the first week in November, we will see some of the rest of the iPhone line. Now, as to the breakdown, I'm going to leave that as an exercise for the reader. There is a lot of conflicting information on that. There's reason to believe that the 5.4-inch sizes of the phones will ship first, and the other sizes will ship afterwards. So yes, I do believe the iPhone 12 we will see in October and November. Let's see. What can Apple do to continue to support older computers and laptops? Well, this is an interesting dichotomy. You've got Windows 10, which theoretically will run on something 12 years old. You've got Big Sur, which will run back to the 2013 MacBook Pro. So you've got a difference of 7 years to a difference of 12 years. But if you consider some of the extensions that Apple continues to do, like for instance, there was a Sierra patch, a security patch that went out with Monday's releases of the iOS 14.0.1, or was that last week? It's all kind of blending together. They don't publicize them, but they will support security patches back 5 revisions ago of the Mac OS. Now, if you've got a Lion or a Snow Leopard machine, you're probably done. I don't think you're ever going to see something from Apple ever again. And, you know, good on you for keeping that running, because that's that's noble. I'm not gonna make two shakes about it. That's a noble goal. Keep your old stuff running as long as you can. But yeah, it's I'm not sure Apple sees much of a point in supporting hardware that's much older than 8 years old. So I wouldn't expect much from them. And frankly, operations like this, like your user group here, are the best way to keep your old stuff running. It's absolutely the best way. Is find a bunch of like-minded folks and just keep that stuff running as long as you can until it's just not cost effective to fix it anymore. So, I don't know whose question that was.
That actually sounds like.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking that sounds like a perfect point. The thing we said originally was that the reason we wanted to talk to you was, and we could tell you some things, yes, but also wanted to know more about how you work and what you use Macs for, and what we can do for you. This feels like a good point to ask all of you the answer to that quite vague question of mine. What do you use your Macs for?
Who wants to chip in here? I mean, I don't have any commitments until 5 o'clock my time, but I understand that might be pretty late in the UK.
We may want to go to bed. Gosh, would somebody else like to kick off? I've spent enough time talking. Guys, I'm a photographer and I work in theatre, and I was working in a publicity department from 1984. So when they finally invested in computers, like every other theatre in the country, they invested in Apple. So it made sense for me to do the same. And I'm running a Mac Pro these days and completely happy. There is nothing personally, apart from reducing the price of the current Mac Pro, that Apple could do to help me. I don't know if Mark Riley's with us, but we have a member who works at BT, and they have just bought him a £17,500.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Love one of those.
With wheels or without wheels?
No, without wheels. I suspect they've bolted it to the floor so it can't be pinched.
I mean, you know what? If somebody's going to get out of your house with that Mac Pro under their arm, I mean, maybe just let them, because those are going to be some burly folks. So that is not a small piece of kit.
I assume it's as heavy as the last one.
I mean, well, you know what? The new rounded handles are better than carrying in the old Mac Pros, because I swear they sharpen that aluminum to make it impossible to bring into the Apple Store.
Yes.
Would some other people like to chip in here? Please, please, please.
I mean, if you don't want to, that's fine too. Whatever you guys want to do. This is your meeting. We're just your guests.
Does it make the tea? £17,000?
Sorry, no.
Oh, that's no good then. That's no good.
That's an extra option.
I am having an ongoing discussion about whether or not to buy a kettle that's Bluetooth enabled. The idea that you can text it to start boiling and then it will notify you when it's ready. But the certainty I've got that I will tell it to boil and have forgotten to put any water in, that's what stops it. So. Plus it's £200, so, yeah, glad I brought that up now. Okay.
It only takes 2 minutes to boil.
Rob, I don't know whether I don't know if you're familiar with the new Mac Pro, but I don't know how much wheels cost. But what I do know is that the stand for the lovely 5K monitor that Apple have released to accompany the new Mac Pro, the stand is £1,000.
Yeah.
It's
I'll have to wait for the lottery, I think.
Yes.
I mean, you'd think that I work at AppleInsider, so I have the best of the best. I don't. My MacBook Pro is a 2018. You can't see it here, and I'm afraid I'm going to disconnect if I do here. But we actually made the guys publish a look at the Office back when we all got locked down. And the William, could you toss a link in the chat over there
yeah,
for the desk
absolutely.
piece
I
that we
loved
did.
that feature.
And
Yes.
the part of we just do what works for us. You know, the 2 monitors bolted to the wall here works for me. This
Yeah.
MacBook Pro as my main machine. Up until the 2012 MacBook Pro that I got, I had Mac Pros and I had 3/4 of the way up the Apple line because I needed that power. But doing the same job, the required, you know, on the scale of power, what I needed kept falling and falling and falling. That I didn't need a 10-core Mac Pro anymore. I didn't need, you know, the top of the line MacBook Pro or anything like that. So, but yeah, I mean, William just posted the AI feature in home offices, and if you look at that, there are various pictures from most of the AI staffers on their setup. Like Dan Dilger works on an older 13-inch MacBook Pro in a flat in Germany, just because that's where he is right now.
Yeah.
You know, Amber's got 2 tiny little desks in her Erie apartment. You know, my desk here has evolved a lot over the last 5 years just because of necessity and some personal issues that I've had to deal with in my family. But it's still what I need to do the job. So my philosophy on that, if not Apple's, is if that 2009 iMac works for you and does what you need to do, great. If that, you know, if your iPhone 4 is still functional, use it. That's just that's just my personal philosophy on that. And, you know, I will admit that I've taken apart my Mac Pro more times than I care to count, but that's part of the benefit of some of the older gear is while the gluing down of components is not great from a self-repairing philosophy, it has cut the per capita failure rates for Apple by half in a decade.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So, and that's conservative. It could be more than that, but that's just based on the information I have, taking the worst possible case for Apple under consideration as opposed to the best possible case. Half. And frankly, it had to, right? If it was having the same failure rates as it had in 2010, and I'm not saying Apple's bad, as Apple has grown into, you know, this huge operation selling, you know, 80 million iPhones a year, that would just be an incredible burden on the service departments.
Yeah.
So that they literally had to make that decision to make service sustainable for them. So, let's see. So we don't do this too long here. What lengths Apple will go to protect their data from both criminal intrusions and political demands, such as national security issues. Okay, well, here's the thing about national security issues. And I will also say what I don't like about them. And I will say this as an ex-Submariner with my share of national security issues that I'm aware of. Matters like TikTok, for instance, in the United States, I don't feel it is sufficient for the administration to say it's a national security issue and we don't need to tell you why. I think very much in something like that, they do need to say to some extent why that's the case, especially in a court case. When it comes to the court, if everyone just said, oh yeah, well, we obviously see it and it doesn't go to court, then fine. But there is absolutely a court mechanism for this to get this done. And that isn't happening. But Apple demands that. When Apple was said, hey, we need the information on the San Bernardino shooters, they said, fine, great. Let's get the warrant. We'll get you what we've got. Excuse me. What they did not do is they did not say, well, no, we're not going to help you break into that iPhone. You know, we don't. That's not how this goes. The FBI had their own tools to do so, which is kind of a whole nother story. It is Apple under warrant will give information that it has. And they will give the contents of your iCloud up if they have a warrant to do so. But what they will not do is they will not monetize that iCloud. They will not sell that iCloud. They will not do any of the stuff because Apple has based their entire core identity on protecting your data. So you were raising your hand, Mike? Oh, okay. I thought you were, I thought you put your hand up for something on that. So, I mean, this is obviously, given the existing administration, this is a very tricky subject. As far as criminal intrusions go, if you remember back to the days where there were celebrities having their private photos taken, that wasn't an Apple security issue. That was social engineering. And I don't want to say to anybody that Apple is impervious to any kind of hack, because no one is ever impervious if somebody's determined enough, has enough time, and has enough computing power to do it. But I also don't want to put fear in anybody saying that Apple's like, oh yeah, Bill's data, yeah, here it is. Go ahead, you can have it, no problem. They have, Apple has procedures. They have, okay, this is national security, this goes through this channel. This is law enforcement, it goes through this channel. Oh, you're just looking for somebody's information? Yeah, get lost. And that sometimes does hurt the user because say you had a wealthy benefactor that died, he willed you his MacBook Pro, but it's got all locked down with iCloud. Better start getting ready to jump through some paperwork hoops to deal with that, because you can't just bring it to an Apple store and say, hey, I need this unlocked. So Apple, to stick with their security and to stick with their national security rules, it does sometimes inconvenience the customers, but I think that's the price you got to pay for that. So I don't know whose question that was, and I hope that answered the question.
I remember actually sorry, I'm going to say about trust. When Apple and Google came out with the COVID technology, the first reaction was to distrust both of them. And then over time, you see governments around the world coming out with things that are far worse. Suddenly, yeah, I trust Apple and Google. So it's a perception thing as well as actuality.
It didn't hurt with the Apple and Google thing that they said, okay, here's the program and here's the code. This wasn't obfuscated code. This wasn't a blind API that you could plug in and it would magically work. This is literally the pair of them saying, okay, well, you go review it. So if you don't like it, then don't use it. That's fine. But the problem with that is on the flip side of this, since Apple doesn't really talk about itself, when social media starts screaming about, oh my God, Apple's tracking us, Apple really didn't say that much about it. They would have a couple more news briefings and say, okay, well, we're doing this express now. This is new. But in that briefing, they didn't say anything about any of those reports. So, as a corporation, they've decided not to discuss internal matters, and that's fine. But there's enough out there saying that the trust in Apple to date is well placed in that regard. So, anybody, I mean, I don't know whose question that was. I just have a list of questions.
Yeah, no, neither do I. But
okay. Cloud computing. Should we use terminals with all our data in the cloud? My personal philosophy on this is I want my data under my control as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So Apple doing its recommendations on my phone instead of on an Apple server somewhere, I prefer that. And other things such as that. Now, this is a valuable source of information. So whose cloud you use depends on how much you want to pay. Really, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If you want to pay for iCloud, that's about as good as it's going to get. If you want to use Google's free services, well, you can expect a little bit of intrusion. They don't straight sell your data. I mean, that's kind of a misconception about Google. They're not afraid to use it to advertise to you, but they don't just take like these big bins of data and sell it over. And I'm sorry if I'm distracted because my son is out in the front yard and I don't know exactly what he's doing. Oh, his aunt is with him, so that's fine. Increasingly, we are heading more toward a cloud environment than we are a local storage kind of thing. I have my photos in the cloud, but I also have several hard backups of them, not on paper, but I have several data backups in various locations because I cherish those pictures enough that I just don't want one cloud failure to cause a problem. So I think this is less about just using terminals with all our data in the cloud, is less about cloud computing and more about how you want to handle your data. If your data is ephemeral, then sure. But if your data is not and your data is precious to you, then you need to have non-cloud storage versions of it.
Can I just point out, Liz Gardner, you're nodding very vigorously here. And also, your name is really familiar. Are you a writer? Do I know your work? Oh, still muted.
No, I'm not a writer, but there is a lady who is an author with a similar name, but I have had a theatrical show. I've had a theatrical show
right.
from China,
Go,
which has gone based around the world. So yeah.
Wow.
might have
Okay,
known me
that's a
from that.
small thing. All right, congratulations on that. But you were nodding so vigorously
Yeah,
there.
because I know people who say, oh, the cloud is everything, the cloud is the bee's knees. But quite frankly, I agree with Mike. I like to have my data on hard drives and I can sort of touch them and I know they're there. I have cloud as well, but I think it's always a good idea to have a physical copy as well, particularly if they're important things, you know, to your family or you. That's my take on it anyway. That's what I think.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I sometimes think Apple believes everybody has the perfect Wi-Fi that they have at Apple Park. With a number of times, you know, the offloading of apps to save space. Well, there was a Tube app I used to go to London. I need it every 6 months or so. But according to Apple, I'm obviously not using it enough. Put it away. But could you download it when you got to London? No. So calm.
Old-fashioned, call me old-fashioned.
Well, let me give you a case in point really quickly. Because of some benefactors, I got to take my kids to Disney World last November. And because there were so many people in the park, the only place my photos existed for a while was here. Between the park and the hotel and really, really poor LTE, that's it. That's the only place my pictures exist. And and I understand that if you had a film camera, that was the case where, oh, hey, we screwed up your developing. Sorry, your pictures are gone. I get it. But, you know, the very first thing I did when I got back to the hotel is I plugged the phone in and I backed them up. So because those pictures are precious to me and they will continue to be precious to me. So yes, cloud computing is the future and there's a reason to use it, but within reason. And just where that line you draw is a very personal thing, and like I said, depends on how ephemeral your data is, and if you don't mind somebody using it to advertise to you, I guess. That's all the pre-prep questions I've got. I am happy to answer questions.
Mike, there are a couple of more questions on the chat.
Oh, and they're in chat. Okay, let me pop on over there.
I'd like to ask something as well afterwards.
Oh, go ahead. Why don't you go first while I'm reading here?
Right. Well, I'm using I've got a Mac Pro. I've got an iMac, a Mac Mini, and an old Power PC, which I'm using for a while. And I wanted to buy an old Mac Pro, like circa 2012, and have it, you know, altered inside and have it upgraded, because I just think it's fun, and I think Apples should be fun. You should enjoy your life. Do you think it's a good idea? Would you recommend it?
If we're talking about the towers, which I assume you are based on 2012,
the cheese grater.
Yeah, there are some significant technological gaps in those machines versus now. That serial ATA2 is the bus for the hard drives on there, which means that instead of 600 megabytes per second, you're limited to 300 megabytes a second on, say, an SSD. Not a showstopper, just slower. The PCIe bus is not an X3, it's an X2. So anything you're doing on there is going to be a bit slower in exchange. And at this point, you've got to start worrying about the age of the hardware. So if you looking at that 2012 Mac Pro you're talking about, there's a very real chance that it's not a 2012, that's a 2010 that's had its ROM flashed to be what's called the 5.1 Mac Pro, the last one and the best one. So instead of this 5.1 Mac Pro you're looking at that had to have been made in 2012, now there's another potential 2 years before it that it could have been made. So that's a 10-year-old machine. That's okay, assuming that you get a chance. I don't think I would buy a Mac Pro online without looking at it first and seeing it run. I've just seen too many problems with the battery clip broken, or, oh, hey, this RAM slot doesn't work, but the rest of them are fine, don't worry about it. Or things like that. I've just seen too many problems like that to really consider buying one without sitting down and using it and playing with it.
Okay.
It can serve you for as long as it lives. You know, the hardware is good. Like I said, I've got one in the other room. It's not presently running. And frankly, shipping to the UK would be prohibitive. I'm sorry. Otherwise, I would happily sell it to you for a song. But even shipping SSDs to William has been a challenge. But yes, the machine will get the job done. Like I said, I mean, I've dealt with publishers as recently as 2 years ago that were still using old Snow White Macs like a 2CX or a 2CI, just because it has always been thus. So it's if it works for you, then keep using it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
From Paul G. If the U.S.-China relationship continues to deteriorate, do you see Apple moving manufacturing out of China? No. While there are products like the AirPods that are being made in Vietnam and Korea, I do not see iPhone manufacturing ever coming out of there beyond, say, India, which has its own political problems. I was trying to say this politely, but I'm not going to say it politely. Apple has enough money and clout that they can bully just about anybody they want, including the administration. The whole Mac Pro in Texas thing. The president said, hey, we're going to make the Mac Pro in Texas. And Apple said, we'll make some, sure. But there was never any pushback, never any slam, never any indication, no Fed feedback or anything like that. And while I don't think that Apple uses their powers for good, like for instance, I don't think that they pay a fair amount of tax in Europe and in other countries, not in the United States. I think that kind of power will prevent them from seeing any real political pushback manufacturing phones in China. At least in the near term. Global politics are funky. If you had told me when I was in the Navy that China was going to be the problem, I would have laughed at you. So it's how things evolve in the next 5 years, but not in the next 2 years or 3 years. I don't see it happening. I was told the Apple Google app doesn't require you to scan an app if you go to a venue. Is it just governments want to know where you are? Is that true? Well, if the governments want to know where you are, they have that information for the asking. They have it from your wireless carrier. They have it from 3, and they have it from AT&T for me or Verizon. They can get that information without a warrant. So it's not so much about Apple and Google wanting to give the information to the government, because that whole chip thing with the vaccine that they've been talking about is equally ludicrous, because if you got one of these, people could spot you within 3 yards anyway. So it's kind of a moot point. Mac Pro, let's see. Flash number 2009, Mac Pro's 2012 spec. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I like that the Flash exists. That's not the point. It's just my issue is with people saying, oh, hey, this is a 2012 Mac Pro, when it's not. Several clients like the Mac Pro this area, easy to upgrade, powerful and reliable. I agree. My son currently has my main Mac Pro at Swansea performing CFD analysis. Why? It blows the doors off any PC, of course. Yeah. And a lot of this, and for calculations like that on the CFD analysis, the ECC RAM, the error correcting RAM, makes a huge difference in that, which the regular Mac line doesn't have. So off topic, please tell me about your headset. I'm crystal clear. And, I don't have one in here, but it's an Amazon vendor with too many syllables in its name. It is just an MPOW USB headset. Nothing fancy. I don't have a link convenient, but I'll give it to William and he will relay it to you. The reason why I do this, and you'll note that I have 1 year off, the 1 year off is actually a radio trick. I used to work at a rock station called Rock 102 in Western Massachusetts. And so you could hear what was going on around you. Sometimes you'd have 1 ear off and 1 ear on the monitor. But I don't use big cans like these as often. This is a review product. This is just a wireless headset, because I can't hear my children if I've got cans on. So but that's why.
And that's a bad thing.
One of them is 8 and the other is 10. The mobile ones, at least, and they get into a lot. So it's yeah. I like knowing something is on fire before the fire gets to me.
I can tell you what I've learned about all your takes. You're all hardware nuts, aren't you? I'm the only software fan. What's going on?
I disagree.
Flashed a ROM.
But by definition, I think everyone is a software fan, because you can look at your hardware all you want, but without the software, you can't do anything with it.
Thank you. Exactly. Yes. Okay.
Now, where the opinions vary is on what software to use. Like, for instance, William, you do your writing in what for the site?
At the moment, Drafts 5.
Do you know what I use?
I've never even heard of it.
I think text edit.
I use something.
Yeah, right.
I use text edit because it gets out of the way. It doesn't do anything I don't need it to do. So that doesn't mean I don't like other applications. I mean, I haven't looked at other applications, but it's just, that's the tool that works for me. And everyone here in this meeting has a different workflow and has a different way that they like to do things. And that's kind of the point of the Mac is, if I'm using my Mac, I mean, I love tinkering in the gear. I love taking apart Mac Pros. I love putting video cards in them. I have always loved doing that. But the hardware gets out of the way.
About Final Draft. Okay.
The hardware gets out of the way. I mean, that's the reason why I stuck with Mac and stuck with Apple all these years, is the hardware doesn't get in the way of what I need to get done.
Actually, I remember when I went freelance first in '95, I had a PC because I was working on a PC magazine, and I have a Mac for myself. I bought a laser printer and I set aside the afternoon to get that laser printer working with the Mac, because I'd done it before with PCs. I was used to it. And I plugged in the wire, and the Mac said, "So do you want to use this one now or all the time?"
Yeah.
All the time. Afternoon off. And that is what this should be.
Yeah, and I agree. It's, like I said, Windows has its uses for me. I do use Windows professionally. I support Windows, and I support Mac out in town and my increasingly smaller contract lists of people that I deal with anymore, because I just don't want to anymore. But yeah, I mean, for work, I'm using my Macs. So I'm here as long as you folks are. So if you guys want to keep hammering me with questions, I'm good with it.
If there are questions, great. But yeah, it's about 7 minutes past 9 p.m. here. So unless anybody has more questions, it's all gone quiet again.
James is waving. I'm not.
All right, look, guys, we publish AppleInsider all day, every day. We start at 5. William starts at 5. Mikey Campbell stops working at about 2 in the morning. So there's only about 3 hours in there that we don't publish stuff. So stop by. Like I said, we're not always the first, but we do try and tell you the whole story accurately rather than try and be first.
I'm always staggered at just how much stuff there is.
Yeah, I mean, and the aperture on that opens and closes depending on just realities of what's going on. Like, there will be days that we can't get to it all, so we have a pretty tight aperture. But there are news days like today that there's not that much going on. So William, you wrote features all day. You wrote future features all day, didn't you?
Yeah. Which is, I must admit, I love doing features. I love news stories where something's happened that I don't happen to know anything about, and I have to learn it and understand it and see what the relevance is to our audience and get it out there. I find that just such a rush. But I'm more naturally a features guy because I love delving into things. So that balance was great today. Yeah.
So just a quick push. And again, William is at 58 keys. I think you already posted there.
Yes.
And William periodically helps me out on the Space Javelin podcast, which is a mostly tech-oriented one that we record on Saturdays and publishes on Mondays. We're on iTunes. It's just a URL because, frankly, I use it as an event. And, it's a little saltier language. I think Charles mostly edits those out, but, I've been out of the Navy a long time, but there are just some verbal tics you just can't get out. So it's, yeah, yes, I've maintained my language to be a little less colorful than normal. That's right.
Well, this has been a fantastic evening, gents. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. If there's, if you look at stories we've written on AppleInsider, our emails are there. Mine's at Mike at AppleInsider. Williams is William at AppleInsider. Feel free to shoot us emails.
Brilliant.
A treat getting to talk with, what's the phrase? Like-minded sounds sort of faintly political, but I mean, we're all Mac fans, and so often I'm not working with Mac fans. This has been a treat, even with all your flashing ROMs and hardware things. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, let's do this next year.
Would love to. I'd certainly take you up on that. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. All right, so I do have a child beating on the door who's asking to be fed, so I probably better get to that. So thanks for listening to me talk for almost 2 hours, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Suffolk.
Thank
you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Members of Suffolk Mac User Group, lovely people. Can I just remind you, I know that some of you arrived after we started the meeting, that I'm planning an additional short Zoom meeting at 7:30 next Wednesday evening, just to launch our new members message board. And I'll be posting out about that tomorrow. have a lovely evening, what's left of it, and hopefully see you all next week. And thanks very
Thanks,
much.
Mike.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers. Thanks you all. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Cheerio.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
Right.
Thanks for a lovely evening. Very interesting. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Richard. Good night.
Cheers all.
So I went to an RPS meeting yesterday, which was a really good meeting with a fantastic photographer. And the guy who was controlling the meeting actually switched off the second that the speaker finished speaking. And I felt like somebody who'd just been invited around to someone's house and had the front door slammed in my face. So I'm just going to sit here until you all go now.
There you go. Cheers.
See you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Patrick. Andrew.
I'm unmuted. Sorry.
Oh, right.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot.
Lovely evening.
Cheers.